Welcome to the Investor Voice, a KLAS Research podcast. I'm Justin Long, your host, Director of Investment Advisory Services here at KLAS Research. This podcast is designed for the healthcare IT investor and will focus on relevant topics, data, and insights. Joining me today is Bradley Hunter, our Senior Research Director over Value Based Care, which is a very broad topic. I know you cover a lot of segments and categories, Bradley. What does that really constitute?
Well, the core of what we cover is pop health technology, so technology focused for population health, value-based care services, which are outsourced and managed services, social determinants of health, data and analytics platforms, transitions of care, just a few of the fun things happening in healthcare today.
Yeah, that's a mouthful. I'm glad you said it and I didn't. So, but appreciate you sitting down and taking time. Our topic today is one that is relevant. It's been at top of mind of organizations for actually several years now. And it's still a hot topic, but there is some unknown and uncertainty on where it's going and where it's at. And I'll take the mystery out of it. It's value-based care.
Yes.
That being said, the pandemic has really made things interesting for healthcare organizations, in particular the leaders in these organizations, as they've maybe shifted their strategy, they've reshaped their thinking, maybe put a pause or made a 180 on kind of the direction they're going. I think the real question is for our listeners and others in the industry is what's happening with value-based care. Is it really the way of the future? Or are healthcare organization leaders putting their hands up and saying, no, we're on a complete halt. We're not going to do anything with this. Maybe some saying we're not doing anything until we're forced to. Love to know what your research findings are as you're interviewing these healthcare leaders, working with these technology companies. Share, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so one of the really interesting things that has happened during the pandemic. So every year for the past couple of years, we've done the Chime Most Wired report. And one of the things that we've asked is about your value-based contracts and how much revenue is tied to what types of value-based contracts. So everything from a pay-for-performance all the way to fully capitated contracts. And we've seen gradual growth in that over the last several years. And then last year, we saw a reversal in that, where there was an increase in fee-for-service revenue. And so that set off some alarm bells. I'm like, whoa, man, what's going on here? And the more conversations I've had about that, it feels more like a holy crap moment, if we can say that on camera.
Probably. You said it, so go ahead.
So we did. But it's like, okay, in 2020, like I remember in 2020 Q2 financials, the question was, how many millions of dollars are we going to be in the red? And people weren't coming in for elective surgeries, right? And there's just a lot of revenue not coming into the hospital. One of the things that happened there is that people looked across the fence at their neighbors who were in fully capitated contracts and they're like, hey, it's business as usual over there. Like, what's going on over there? So there's a lot of interest in that. So there's more contracts being signed there. But you also have this, how do we make up for lost revenue? And the answer to that is crank up the fee-for-service machine. We got to get some heads in beds.
Sure.
So you might call it a knee-jerk reaction. It's a long-term knee-jerk reaction, but that's kind of the feel that we get. So is value-based care and value-based reimbursement still the way of the future? CMS in no uncertain terms has said that. Sure. So they're really pushing towards that. Commercial payers are saying, yeah, this sounds really good. So the payer community is pushing towards it and the provider community is working towards it as well. So I think we'll see that continue to ramp up. So 2022 should be a good year. In 2023, 2024 and beyond, we'll see that continue to climb. Now, one other interesting thing, so there was an article just recently in Fierce Healthcare where they said doctors are still being paid for volume even though we're pushing towards value-based reimbursement. So, but we're starting to see some organizations where they're starting with a small cohort. So they're starting with a small cohort of individuals and they are completely flipping the script with those doctors where they're saying,
no more fee-for-service.
We're not doing fee-for-service. This is who you're going to see, and you're going to see less patients in a day because we want you to practice care the way you want to practice care. Yeah. And like one of these health systems, this was in our downside risk leader study, one of them said, we're terrified that nobody is going to say, yes, we want to do this as doctors. And so they had a really small group that they started with, and now their problem is they don't want to scale it too fast because so many doctors have heard about it and they want to do it.
They want to do what they're trained to do, right? Work with patients, deliver quality, and not be pushed from room to room. So interesting. That's an interesting study that's taking place.
I think that we'll see value-based care and value-based reimbursement continue to push forward because it feels good when you do it right.
Sure.
The problem is that it's scary to transition from a business model you've been doing for 50 plus years to something that's completely new.
Change is difficult, no doubt about it.
Agreed.
But it sounds like it's a blip on the radar as opposed to a complete halt or pause. So that's great clarification. Bradley, as we talk about maybe the barriers or the obstacles that prevent true success in adopting a value-based care model, what are those? I mean, there's the obvious ones, but maybe obvious as well as maybe those others that aren't considered as often with these organizations until they get into it.
So really a couple of key things there. So number one is just confidence in moving forward. That's the number
simple.
one. We did a study and we said, what are the reasons for feeling successful in value-based care and not feeling successful?
And that's number one?
Number one reason was previous experience and lack of experience, right? So there's no confidence because of a lack of experience. So people have to get into this, get their feet wet, and then they can start moving forward. So there's no greater teacher than experience, and there's nothing that can make up for lack of experience.
Sure.
So that's really the biggest one. And then the other part of it is just understanding how you're going to make that transition as an organization. And so you have to understand, how are we going to get paid? How does that change? And then what kinds of things do we need to understand as an organization so that we can make that change? So huge focus on data, analytics, understanding that. And
so, we're going to get into some of that.
Yeah, we'll get into that quite a bit.
Okay, that's good. And I think it's a great segue, though, as we look at healthcare organizations, as they're looking at potentially now making this transition. They need to find a partner, right? Not just a vendor. And as we look at all of the different partners that are available, there's obviously the technology companies, the service consulting firms, and then, of course, more the full managed services. What ultimately are, as you're interviewing these executives, what are they looking for in a true partner?
So in a true partner brings expertise in how to go about things, in what others have done, right? So that real world experience, a true partner shares that and says, this is where we're going to go together. So that, if you think about going into a maze, it's not someone that says, here's a map of the maze, good luck, or here's a string, hope you make it out, and wish them the best of luck.
If we don't see you, maybe next time.
A true partner comes to the maze with you and walks beside you as you go through the maze together, and they guide you. Now, one of the interesting things is among all of those different categories of vendors that you mentioned, the technology vendors, the more services heavy vendors, and the consulting firms, there's a mix of all of that happening in the market. So there's the full managed service, outsource everything play. That was really in vogue like 2015, 2016. It's kind of worn off on its shine a little bit. And a lot of that is just because of how much of the healthcare dollar it demanded. So that still exists, and there's still organizations doing it. Just it hasn't taken off like a rocket like we maybe anticipated it could.
Okay.
Where the market has shifted towards is, okay, I need a technology partner because this data thing is not going to take care of itself. And if I'm doing it all on spreadsheets, this is going to be really painful. And so there's a varying degree of what happens inside the world of data as to, okay, is this something that is a pop health platform that we have as a partner who does this data specifically for pop health? We're also seeing a group of vendors that are called data and analytics platforms. That's what we've termed them. And they can do aggregation, management, basic analytics, and also some advanced analytics where you bring in AI, machine learning, and then they do all of this on a platform that's interoperable. And also there's a lot of security controls around who can see what data, because there are some people that I don't want seeing my data, like Justin Long. I don't want you to know some of the things that I know about me.
And I think it'd be mutual, right?
Yeah.
We want that protected, so I understand that. So there's obviously that's a huge component of these vendors, of protecting that.
So then the other part of the market, so with the technology, it's shifted where several technology vendors, they are offering add-on services. So you can do data analytics as a service. you can outsource a couple of care managers from them. You can have them help with data aggregation. You can have them help you write reports so that you can get the right dashboards and reports for your organization. So the technology partners are branching into services, and that's creating or filling a need in the market that's out there.
But not necessarily that full managed services, so it's almost just kind of your menu offering, right? You pick and choose some of those. Always investors are wondering, again, who's performing, who's not. You can probably not be specific here today, but we can at least maybe narrow in. What differentiates the performers? And I realize some of these are categorized a little differently on how you describe, but the performers versus maybe the rest of the players or the rest of the pack.
Yeah.
In our research, what are you finding?
So a couple of things coming up in our research. So number one is who's being selected. So this is from our Decision Insights research that I hope a lot of our investors subscribe to.
They consume this.
Yes. It is fantastic data. One of the things coming up is that those companies that are being considered are the ones that have a very strong focus on data.
Okay.
So that data component, some of them are also rated in the data and analytics platform segment. So several of them are over there. And then there are others that just are really strong in data, both the aggregation, normalization, and presentation of that data.
Okay.
So that contingent of vendors continues to get a lot of looks in the market. Now you also have
And where are those? I'm sorry. So we've got our data analytics platform vendors, this other group that is more as you just described there, right?
Yeah,
Kind
so they're in PHM.
Okay.
We don't have them rated in data and analytics
They're
platforms.
in our PHM segment, okay.
And they might come over here eventually, but we're very picky about who shows up in data and analytics platforms.
Is that more advanced data? Is that really who falls into that? Okay,
Yep.
AI, some of those areas.
Yeah,
okay.
They have to have some component of that
Okay.
to be in that.
Okay, that's helpful. But we do obviously have those that are performing well in both population health and our data analytics platform vendors. And our investors can see that if they have access to our data or wanting access to our data, of course. And you hit one of my questions. What are some of the key purchase criteria or what's driving those decisions? You hit that. Maybe another question. So that we talk about what a true partner is and what health organizations are seeking when they kind of marry themselves with a strong partner. Does that change as we look now into the future a little bit? Are they looking today? Here's the needs that are needed criteria to meet what we're trying to achieve. But if we're looking, say, 2 or 3 years down the road, are they looking for a different type of technology company? And maybe the second half of that, does that technology company even exist today?
So the data need is not going to change,
Okay.
right? Because no matter where you are in the future, you're going to need data.
Data is king and queen, right?
Yes. So that is absolutely going to continue to be a need. Now, when it comes to what do I need in the future, so 3-4 years down the road, and this is something that we're starting to hear about vendors who do this. And it's being able to administer all types of value-based contracts. So there were a group of vendors who did bundle payments administration. I think all of them have been acquired now.
Okay.
And that was something where you think about it on an intellectual level, and you're like, oh, that's easy. You get $65,000 for a hip replacement, and you just spread that out over everybody. You're like, whoo. Yeah, it's not quite that simple because you have pre-op, op, and post-op, and everybody has to get paid, and you don't want to go over, and you have to make sure that it's fair. So the administration of that payment was tricky.
Yeah.
And then you get into the capitated contract side. So payers have been doing that for a long time, but that's going to shift down to the providers. And one job title that most providers don't have is actuary. And so that is going to be something that will be really, really helpful for the provider community going forward is who can help me understand, navigate, and administer my value-based contracts.
Sure. That's really helpful. So that's what we can kind of expect, I think, in the future. And I'm even going to have you go kind of a prognosticator even further. And we generally don't do that here at KLAS. We don't prognosticate. We represent the facts and data as we have them, right? And we give insights around those. But if I may, put that on over here and say, where do you, and you've addressed this, but anything that you maybe have not shared where you see value-based care, say 5 years from now? When we look at healthcare organizations, what percentage of their business, obviously a lot of this will be influenced by the payer, CMS, where do you see that really moving? And if you take 2027, where are we?
2027. So in 2027,
and you can go 2026, 3 to 5 years from now. What does the landscape look like?
Let's see. Here's a couple of things. If I'm putting on my, I have my crystal ball in front of me and looking into the future, I would say we're going to see the two canoes diverge.
Okay.
And let me tell you what I mean by that. So right now, providers have one foot in two canoes, one being fee-for-service, the other being value-based reimbursement. And those canoes are diverging. And at some point, the provider organization has to say, we're all in on this or that canoe.
Okay.
They've got to pick one. And I think we're going to see several major organizations in the United States switch to value-based reimbursement.
100% value-based care model. Okay.
Where they say, hey, we're all in on this. This is what we're doing. This is the way of the future. And we're going to figure out how to make this work. And I think we'll see that. I think we're going to see some really cool innovations in how care is administered and the patient experience. I think we'll see some big changes there. So once the payment aligns through value-based reimbursement, then we can change the patient experience drastically. So I think we'll see that happen. And I think we'll also see a lot of investment into social determinants of health. I think we're seeing that already.
Starting to pick momentum up in there big time.
And I think that it's it's one of those things that makes sense. Where you're like, oh, yeah, we should take care of everybody in our community. We should help them with things that impact their health way more than being here at the hospital. Like, that makes sense and it feels good. Like, people like working on social determinants of health because at the end of the day, you get to see some really cool things happen. Is it easy? No. Is it painful? Yes. And is it hard work? Absolutely. But the payoff can be very, very, I'll just say immense.
Yeah. I mean, intrinsically too, right? You're actually seeing some results that you don't always necessarily see in front of you, like you mentioned. So it sounds like, again, I mean, naturally, when we see this divergence that you're discussing, we're going to see some new players come. And you're seeing maybe some of those already starting. And that's maybe the final area that I'd like to discuss here for just a moment. In our emerging technology efforts, you referenced just a minute or so ago, there's a few companies that you're kind of keeping an eye on. I'm sure more will be in the works and will be rising. But can you maybe just discuss what are some of the emerging technology efforts that you haven't said now that you're seeing are starting maybe to either hop on this canoe or are kind of working both sides and eventually may just fall into this right side of the stream, if you will?
Yeah, so a couple of cool technologies that we're seeing. So one is getting data in front of the clinician. Now that's, if you are an Epic shop and you're using Epic, getting that data into Epic is great. If you are using more than just Epic, then that's where the challenge comes in, right? And so all the best of breed vendors feel this as well, because where the rubber meets the road is with the care management team and with your clinicians. Right, so that's where you see the patient, you interact with the patient, you got to get the right data,
actionable data,
and it's got to be actionable data to them at the point of care. And I'm starting to see some companies where they are making that easier. So you don't have to be Epic putting it into Epic, but they're able to, in creative ways, get data in front of the clinician that feels native to the EHR, but is not a native EHR solution. So that's something I've seen that's emerging.
Okay.
I've seen those that help with payment reform, so they pay doctors quicker. So instead of saying, okay, do this and I'll give you a bonus check in 18 months,
right?
It's, okay, you did this, we anticipate this is what the bonus check will be for that, so we can pay you out on that quicker. So you incentivize the behaviors that you want through that payment reform. And then the last one that I'm seeing is just those that have a unique approach to data, where they say, hey, we're not going to do all of this downstream stuff. We're just going to focus on making data the cleanest, most usable data possible, and we're going to go from there.
Interesting. So they're going to aggregate it and really get that analytics where it's actionable. Which, at the end of the day, garbage in, garbage out, right? We need reliable data from the start to the clinician. Let's close with this, Bradley, because I know our listeners would be interested to know. Any other research we should be aware of that your team is actively involved with, whether it's some additional reports and other studies that are going on this 2022, and what can we kind of expect? I mean, we can always pull from the troves of data and customize a particular diligence project for our investors, but they always want to know what is the latest and greatest in our research world.
Let me tell you the one that I'm most excited about right now.
Let's hear it.
We just kicked off data collection for this. It's our Value Based Reimbursement Perception Report.
Okay.
And some of these questions we've been discussing. So we'll be asking, how much revenue do you currently have tied to value-based contracts? How much revenue do you expect to be tied to value-based contracts in 3 to 5 years?
Okay.
And then what vendor partners are best suited to help you in that transition?
Nice.
So I think that's going to be a dynamite report. So I'm really looking forward to that one. We're kicking off research in transitions of care.
Big demand for that one.
Yes, that's our initial look into that report. We are scheduled to kick off data collection for that in about a month's time. We are also working on our next iteration of data and analytics platforms. So that's going to be another exciting report. And there's so many others, but I'll say those are my top 3 right now that we're working on.
You got a busy year.
Yeah.
As always. But those are exciting reports, and I think every one of those are relevant. Now, I know, to our investor community. Bradley, well, thank you. We've covered a lot today, and I know we could go much longer, but this has hopefully been really valuable to our investors and those that are actually listening or watching. If you do have more inquiries, would like to get more access to the data that we've discussed today or upcoming market study reports that Bradley has discussed, please feel free to send an email to investorservices@KLASresearch.com. Until our next episode, this is Justin Long with the Investor Voice signing off.